So you've met someone nice, you got a date. Someone suggests oysters. What a great idea. I hear oysters are fun, they're sexy. Oysters have something of a reputation. The only problem is you've never had an oyster before and you really have no idea what to expect. When you go into Rodney's Oyster House, order oysters, sit down and eat them. We're going to walk you through the process of the oyster. First of all, what's an oyster? An oyster is a bivalve. It's got sort of a teardrop shape. Got a hinge here, you got a flat, sort of fluted edge on the other side. Inside that is the tasty, tasty meat. There's over 300 species around the world. We eat about 5 different kinds here in North America. Now here at Rodney's, we have a list of oysters that we're going to give you. Different names, different geography. They're from Maryland, they're from Maine, they're from Washington State, they're from British Columbia, they're from the Maritimes. Best way to order oysters, figure out if you want something a little bigger, something a little bit smaller. Start with that. Let the people that work with oysters professionally make up your mind for you. They'll pick the best ones that they think are looking good on that day. You gotta remember, there are only a few actual species of oysters that we're working with. And each species has a pretty similar flavor profile. If you look here, we got a raspberry point, we got a choppers, we've got a cleaved-in coast oyster. The choppers and the raspberry, exact same species of oyster. You can see they look a little bit different. The flavor is definitely a little bit different, but all in all, it's the same species of oyster. These guys could breed, and you wouldn't have any mutant monster hybrids. This is a cleaved-in oyster. This is from New Zealand, and this is called a gigas oyster. Different species altogether. Going to have a completely different flavor profile from these two. You can learn as you go about what each oyster is going to taste like. The more important thing is that you get the experience to start with. We serve the oysters raw on the half shell. We'll also serve them cooked occasionally, but the raw oyster is really the pinnacle of what we do. We'll serve a little bit of lemon, some freshly grated horseradish. Lemon is the key element to eating an oyster. And really, an oyster doesn't need anything else. The thing with dressing your oyster to remember is that sauce, it's a little bit like lingerie. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. You want to add to the experience of the oyster without covering anything up. Here at Rodney's, we have 5 different sauces that we make, along with a bunch of classics, Tabasco, Worcester sauce, what have you. There's no point eating an oyster if you're just going to beat the hell out of it. So just a little bit, just to give you that little hit. A mignonette's the same thing. If you drown your oyster in vinegar, well, you're not going to taste the oyster. But a little bit of citrus or a little bit of vinegar, it's going to cut some of the salinity and it's going to elevate the oyster eating experience for you. Eating an oyster, pretty much the easiest part. All are built basically the same. So you got the inside of the oyster. This is the adductor muscle. This is what you got to cut. You do it right, the oyster just floats gently in its own liquor. Typically, you eat an oyster from the wide end, like so. It slides right in. Chew it up a little bit, and there you go.